Hi, hello, and welcome to That Sounds Gay, a podcast for queer people by a queer person with a lot of opinions that nobody asked for. My name is Jer, and I will be your podcast host for a short period of time. We are going to be joined by my very lovely friend Jasmine. Today, we're going to be talking about some food and snacks and such. But before we get into that, let's talk about soup. I love soup. I'm a big fan of soup. I think soup is delightful during really any time of the year. It doesn't matter if it's hot, if it's cold. Soup is best, I think, when it is colder out because you get that sort of warm sensation through your whole body. And I love that feeling of just the warmth inside of you while everything outside is just so hot. It's just so cold out, you know what I mean? Soup has to be an experience for me. For me, I want the tactile nature of getting a soup. I like restaurants that just give you the full experience of it. Making it at home is fine, but I love going to a restaurant and getting it and you see it presented in that nice little ramekin. It's usually what you'll see them packaged, and normally they don't give you like just some cheap bowl unless you're going to a family style restaurant like Olive Garden. You'll get like a big pasta bowl that's full of soup, and there's that experience where you are getting all these aromas from the soup, from this little bubbling concoction of magic. All of the aromas permeate your nose. You see the greenery on top because they'll put maybe celery or maybe some green onion if it's fancy, depending on what kind of soup you're getting. So you have all these lovely visuals and you break into whatever you're eating. I love a French onion. And you break through that cheese and that bread that's at the top and you get that stringy cheese that's coming down it, right? And you're just getting all of these smells from all these roasted vegetables that are in there. And you blow off the steam. And then there's more aromas that come out as it's cooling down and other flavors are presenting, right? And then you just get that initial hit of that soup. And it's so good. And it just makes your body happy. Unless it's horrible soup, in which case this is not the right scenario for this. But I love that whole experience of soup eating. I read somewhere that back in the day, soups and stews and things like that were typically made by people who were working all day. So they would set up their cauldron with whatever they wanted to put in it, whatever vegetables and meats, and they just slow roast it all day long so that by the time they got back from working and being in the fields, they didn't have to do all this extra preparation. They could just enjoy this roasted concoction that they made. And I think that still holds true to this day. If you've ever made any type of soup at the end of the night where you are just preparing these vegetables maybe ahead of time, you've already roasted them ahead of time, so that all you have to do is just toss them into whatever your mix is. I personally love like a veggie broth. I know some people will use like a chicken broth. Some people just use plain water because they're crazy if you're making a homemade from scratch soup, right? But there's also a lot of canned options, which I go back and forth on. Campbell's has a good name for a reason because they are just masters at making soup, but it's totally processed. Doesn't give you that same experience of making it yourself. There's this gal that I follow on TikTok who is always doing cooking videos, and I love what she does. I really enjoy her content, but she makes soups every now and again, and it just makes me fueled with exuberance to cook that I'm not actually going to do. Like, I'm not going to sit down and make my own soup. I don't have the time for it. But I love the idea of it, and I love living vicariously through other people's experiences that they have time to make delicious meals, that they can go to the store and buy all the ingredients for it and then sit and cook it all. I'm very envious of the people that can do that and have those skills. I've got a little bit of skills in cooking. Which, can we talk about that really quick? Can we segue into talking about people that can't cook. Is that a red flag for you when dating, or is it just a red flag for me? If you don't know how to cook, you don't know how to make anything for yourself, what have you been doing with your adulthood? Like, legitimately, what have you been doing? Because for me, I didn't really know how to do a ton for a while. I had a lot of things done for me, and that's fine. I had to learn and I had to grow and I had to figure things out, but I knew how to cook really early on. I taught myself from watching Food Network, from watching YouTube videos of people cooking, of just being obsessed with things like that. People that don't know how to cook at all, they don't know how to do anything. They can't even fry an egg. That is kind of a red flag for me. I wonder why these people have never learned how to do anything for themselves. And especially if you're dating, I'm not, but if I was dating and someone said, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to boil water." I would have a big giant question mark. Like, would that be a deal breaker for me? Maybe. It might be just like how if you don't eat certain foods, that could be a deal breaker for me because I share my love by sharing food and by sharing meals, right? Being able to cook. If you don't like something that I love, I don't know if it could work. You know, like if I love making lasagna, which I do, and you despise the lasagna, you don't ever want to see it, you don't ever want to taste it, you don't want to smell it. I don't know if we could be together. Like, I don't know if that would be something I could tolerate long term in a relationship. I just don't think it is. Again, I'm not really looking, so this conversation is kind of null, but it's just something that I think is important. And soup is one of those things that's very easy to cook and to make yourself. It does not take a lot of skill. You need some stock, a bouillon cube, maybe something to thicken it, depending on what kind of soup you're making. You need the vegetables, meats, any grains that you might be putting in it, even, like all your spices and having a knowledge of those spices and how they all would live harmoniously in your meal that you're going to be creating. That's very important to know how to do. You got to know that by adulthood. So I want to talk about like some good soups, but that are just not good for dating. They're good for if you're alone, and that's one, broccoli cheese. Broccoli cheese soup is super, super superior in my opinion, but you better not have anybody going near your butt for the next 24 hours because you're going to be one, blowing ass, like just blowing ass, and you're going to have the most sulfuric gas that you have ever experienced, even if you don't have a problem with dairy, which who doesn't? It's 2024. Everyone's got a problem with dairy these days. Even if you don't have a problem with dairy, the broccoli is so sulfuric. You're going to be farting, just farting. And there are people that are like, "Oh, I know my body." No, don't eat broccoli cheese soup and then try to get your butt ate because that is not the fantasy. But broccoli cheese soup is so good. It's so good. And then especially if you add extra cheese to it, and so you get that cheesy pull. My mouth is watering literally talking about this. That cheesy pull from when you take the soup out. And you've got that one little like broccoli head that's just oozing down into your stock. Oh, so good. And then if you put little tiny mini onions in there, just nicely diced onions. I also really love a French onion soup. That, in my opinion, is super superior. But it's, again, not really something you should have if you're planning on kissing somebody afterwards because your breath is going to be dragon-like. You're going to be blowing fire fumes because your breath is going to be so awful. But it's so good. I love the bread that's in there. I think it's like a French bread that is like cut in a cube, and then you do some broiling of cheese at the top, all those caramelized onions. Nothing is better to me than caramelized onions. I could have caramelized onions all the time. That's one of my favorite ways to make curry is I will roast onions in the oven for like 45 minutes. You do a long ass roast on those onions. Then you take them out and then you maybe put them in a pot with a little bit of butter just to kind of get them going a little bit more. You stick that in your curry. Oh, big nut. So delightful. So delightful. I love a tomato soup. I think that's really nice with the right types of herbs. But for me, tomato soup is a rainy day food. I don't particularly enjoy a tomato soup on just a regular old chilly day. Like if it's the sun's out, it's like 40 degrees outside, it's very chilly. I would prefer a chicken noodle over a tomato. And the other parameter of having a tomato soup for me is that you have to have grilled cheese. That is a must. Like if I'm going to eat a tomato soup, I need to have a nice crispy bread, buttered, fried on both sides, American cheese in the middle because I'm garbage. Please don't at me. I'm garbage. I love cheddar, I love Swiss, I love provolone, I love all kinds of cheese, but I love an American cheddar sandwich or American cheese grilled cheese. That is so good with just butter. So much butter and it's got to be crisp, like near black on the ends because you've toasted it for so long, you grilled it for so long. I like when it's just past that browning caramelized color and it's just about to blacken. That's where the sweet spot is for me. And some people want a bread that's still a little bit white. They don't necessarily want the caramelized buttery ends, which why are you eating a grilled cheese if you don't want it crispy? Like I need to have a cheese pull when I pull it apart. And you take that bread and you break it up into little pieces and you dip it in and you just sop up all that tomato soup so you get all that richness and all that velvetyness of these tomatoes that have been roasted and boiled down and brought into a liquid form. All those spices that have melded in there with the zesty cheese, crunchy buttery bread, and the whole experience sends you to the moon. That is the only way that I like to enjoy a grilled cheese. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy for not wanting to enjoy a tomato soup on its own, but you gotta have grilled cheese with it. The Italian soup from Olive Garden is also really good if you've never had it. There's God, what is it called? It's got some um, sausage in it. It's like an Italian sausage. And there's kale. The Olive Garden soup made me like kale, and it's like a white sauce or a white liquid that's in there. And it's peppery. There's some potatoes that are thick. One of the best soups in the world. I made a dupe of it years ago. I need to dig up that recipe and find it again because it was quite delightful. But you know what I think is really fun if you ever gone to an Olive Garden is getting the soup that is spelled like a slur and seeing people trying to order the, I believe it's pronounced fajol soup. Seeing people pronounce that because they'll legitimately be looking at the menu and they're like, can I get the can I get the that one? And the waiter is fully like, no, say it. Which soup do you want? And they're like, the what one? Which soup was it? Did you want that soup that sounds like a slur? I want you to say that slur. Can you say it? And they pull a microphone and they're like, hey, say it to the whole audience. Tell the whole restaurant which soup you want. And they're sweating bullets. And they're like, can I just get the Italian soup, please? I don't need that one anymore. I don't want the soup. Can I go home? Can you clear out my tab, please? And the waiter's like, don't worry, I'll get you the F slur soup. Don't you worry. I love that so much. It's my favorite thing. Finally, soups. Underrated in my opinion. Baked potato soup. There are people that I've talked to that have never had a baked potato soup. That's nuts to me. That's nuts. How have you never had a baked potato soup? Some people don't like bacon, and some people, God bless their souls, don't like potato. I don't understand those people. I don't get it. I don't want to be associated with people that don't like potato. If you don't like potato, what's wrong with you? Why are you like this? You don't have to be this way. Potato is one of the best things that exists on the planet. Baked potato soup is like thick cuts of potato that have been boiled down till they're soft. soft enough that you could still scoop it up and bite into it, but it's going to melt in your mouth. Chunks of crispy bacon. Don't give me soggy ass bacon. There is nothing more offensive to me than giving me soggy bacon. And what I mean is, when you bite into it, you could literally like put it in your mouth and stretch it before it breaks. No, that is a cardinal sin in my book and in my eyes. Don't give me soggy bacon. I want it to crunch. I think I'm noticing a pattern. I like crunchy bread and I like crunchy bacon. I don't want soggy bacon. I don't want soggy bread. I want it to have a crunch to it. It's fine that it's going to soften up in the soup. It's supposed to. But when you take soggy bacon and you stick it in a wet form, it's going to absorb all that liquid and get soggier. So it's rubber by the time you're biting into it. Jake and I recently got some dinner. I don't remember where it was from. And it was Outback Steakhouse. And I got myself a baked potato soup because I really wanted it. And the bacon was soggy. I ended up pulling out more pieces of bacon from my mouth and just leaving them on the side on the little container and throwing them out because I couldn't chew through it. And when I can chew through meat and I'm reminded that it was an animal, I lose interest in it. When it's crunchy, I forget. So like crunchy bacon works for me because I forget that it was alive. But when it's soft and I can't chew through it properly, I'm reminded that it was living at one point and I lose all interest. It's like the same when I see a bone. Like if I'm eating chicken, I can generally be fine if it's in like a tender or a breast form, if it's been like really finely brought down to something. But as soon as I see that bone, I'm reminded that this was a living thing and something in my brain goes fight or flight and I just can't do it anymore and I'm not hungry. I lose all interest in food. Going back to baked potato soup. So then not only do you have the bacon, you got the potatoes, you've also got some green onion. And typically instead of having like the sour cream, they'll replace that with a creamy white sauce that gives the sort of taste of sour cream and it's a little bit zesty. You'll often see a lot of salt and pepper in there, so it's very seasoned well. I personally love to take like a little pat of butter and stick that in my baked potato soup. And then the last thing is that there's cheese, typically cheddar, and you'll get that cheese pull. And I love that. I love a cheese pull in a soup because it's so hot that it just melts everything down to a liquid. So when your spoon is coming up, you've got all of this cheesy goodness that's coming down. Mama, that's big nut right there. That's such big nut. I love soup. I could talk about soup all day long. I enjoy soup. If you have a favorite one, at me somewhere on Twitter what your favorite soup is. I gotta know. Soup is delightful. We should talk more about soup and how it's not just an appetizer. Soup can be your meal if you put the right things in there, like a French onion soup, a baked potato soup, an Italian soup, depending on what kind of meats you put in there. Like if you do a sausage, that could be a meal if you have like a nice bread next to it, a nice crunchy bread that you could sop it all up with. Even tomato soup could be a meal if you pair it with the right grilled cheese. That could really be a spectacular meal, not just an appetizer, like a pre-dinner, like you're doing soup and then a roast. That is so much if it's the wrong kind of soup. If it's just like a broth and a couple of vegetables, like you put some pumpkin in there, maybe sweet potato, whatever you've got left over sitting in your fridge, you just need to cook. Celery. I understand. You're doing a very light precursor to your meal, and then you're doing something heavier afterwards. So you're sort of warming up your body for the sensation of food. I don't mind that so much. But if you're doing like a big heavy soup, and then you're giving me something really heavy afterwards, or I'm ordering something heavy afterwards, I'm probably not going to finish that second thing. I'm probably mostly interested in whatever the pre-dinner meal is, and that's the soup. But without further ado, let's jump into further conversation about food. And I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. For those of you watching on YouTube, make sure to check out my podcast link in my bio below. Thank you for tuning in.